No intro, straight onto the guide. Mei's primary weapon, the Devil's Advocate, makes Mei fire a stream of frost dealing 55 DPS and freezing an enemy after firing a minimum of 31 rounds for 1.3 seconds. She can also fire icicles every 0.8 seconds, dealing 75 damage with no fall off. The most basic but important combo is the freeze into icicle headshot plus melee. This will allow you to one-shot heroes between 250 and 300 HP, since you can only get one icicle off due to your 0.8 second fire rate in relation to the 1.3 second freeze effect. I would continue using your freeze stream half a second after you freeze an enemy to get a little bit more damage in. In terms of general usage, Mei's freeze is greatly overrated due to the higher burst damage of her icicles, hence when finishing off enemies in mid-fights, landing right clicks will increase your efficiency and build up more ult charge. However, with freeze usage, his tempo explaining why freezing Reaper and Reinhardt is particularly annoying.
Two of the characters in the game who care most about their speed are Reinhardt and Reaper. A little bit of slow on them really ruins their day. It changes the Reinhardt matchup between the other Reinhardt and him. It makes Reaper not able to keep up, get to his targets. Even a tiny little bit of slow is enough to make him think, do I want to Wraith to clear this? Is it annoying enough that I want to Wraith to clear this? And that's more reliable, easier, and you can get it off with less ammo than the actual damage would occur at.
You should also be freezing when right clicks won't confirm kills in short ranges, such as when the enemy Zen ults. This can lead to cooldowns such as Fortify being forced. Mei's first ability, Block, makes Mei regain 50 HPS for 4 seconds paired with a 12-second cooldown. You also restore 15 ammo per second, block all lines of sight, and become invincible in cryo. The first thing to mention is to know when to cancel your cryo. Often at beyond half HP, you can heal up the remainder via AoE healing to maximize your uptime and poke damage. Exceptions would be if there aren't any enemies peeking, in which case you can still farm ult charge by regaining HP in cryo. Unlike Tuaresa's Fortify and Ana's Sleep, since this is a defensive cooldown, you should only use it when you need to. Hence don't use it if you're not missing a large amount of HP, or if you aren't going to be taking incoming damage past your healer's threshold. The last thing I'll mention is that you can cryo in duels to dodge stuns and CC, such as McCree's Flashbang or Sombra's Hack, and to cleanse status effects, such as Ana's Nade, or more importantly, the enemy Mei's Freeze, meaning that you can start freezing, then cryo, then freeze again as your freeze effect will be cleansed, whereas the enemy's freeze effect won't be. Mei's second ability, the $11 billion wall, makes Mei generate an ice wall split into 5 pillars, each worth 400 HP, with a duration up to 5 seconds alongside a cooldown of 12 seconds. Mei's wall is by far the most complex piece of her kit, and if you haven't seen by the timestamps already, this is going to be a lot more than simply splitting the enemy team. The first thing to mention is that if you are going to split someone, such as the enemy team's Reinhardt, timing is vital, as IOSUX elaborates on here.
The wall that you use here is pretty early, and your team can't really do anything with it, because the Reinhardt still has his shield. The only thing that you could do is start moving forward, run into him, and try to freeze him, but that is kind of risky, because you would have to run all the way on the point. So when you're playing against something where you know that you can break the shield, so in this case the Reinhardt, just wait a little bit, break the shield first, and once the shield is a little bit lower, that's when you can look to wall him off, because then you can just break the rest of the shield, and you can freeze him, and you can try to actually confirm the kill that way.
Walls can also be used to block lines of sight to prevent incoming enemy damage, and to make it harder for the enemy team to peel for whoever is walled, as IOSUX again explains here.
Mei Wall isn't just a tool that you use to try and wall people off so you can pick them. You also want to use it during fights just to break LOS with people. Usually tanks are going to be in the front, and then DPS are going to be behind that, and the supports are going to be behind that. So when you're in a team fight, using your wall just to block off the enemy DPS is already going to give you value. So right here, just placing a wall behind the Orisa that's going to block off the enemy McCree and anyone else that's standing behind them. So it's not about actually killing the Orisa or walling her off or anything. It's just about making sure that the enemy DPS can't really do anything, and that they have to walk all the way around of the wall in order to actually do anything.
In terms of specific set plays with walls that you can pull off, here's Tempo explaining a few which would be more applicable in a brawl versus brawl mirror.
You see that their Zarya has drifted even slightly behind their Rhine. A quick wall plus bubble charge, that's a free pin. And the great thing about that is Urine's not going to go too deep with that pin. Urine's not going to be off in Never Never Land. He's perfectly fine because he slammed into the wall that you put right there. Another nice one you can do, if D.Va drifts slightly behind the front line, you can throw up that same wall and immediately, and I do mean immediately, throw a grab out there, and you get a grab on their front line that she isn't able to matrix.
Sempo also explains how a defensive wall can buy time when the enemy team uses a power play ultimate, such as Lucio's Beat, Moira's Coalescence, Briggs Valley, or even Zen's Transcendence here.
Say the front line has broken and the opposing team decides that they want a power play, and they pop Transcendence, Coalescence, Sound Barrier, any of them. Well, your Mei can respond by throwing up a wall, even an imperfect wall that they have to take a second or two to go around, and that buys you some time. You're not terribly threatened by their power play when it's down a couple people. Then once they have rounded the wall with those 6 people, and you've taken off a couple seconds, maybe 3 seconds if you're lucky, now you can answer with your own support ultimate, so maybe you match your sound barrier to their sound barrier. Well, that works out just great, because now you had the later sound barrier, and at the other end of it, you're going to have a 3-second lead of power play time. Finally, a wall after your team is grabbed or shattered, that can reduce follow-up significantly, and that can either mean you save yourself a support ultimate, or it can let you pop that support ult at the very tail end of, say, a grab. And instead of using your sound barrier or transcendence just to protect yourself during a grab, most of your sound barrier or transcendence gets to be used offensively.
Building off of what Tim Paul said there, especially at the end, the concept of ebb and flow, which I got from that OW, and otherwise known as pushing and pulling, can help you punish overextensions from the enemy team with cooldowns such as speed boost and Mei Wall to help you kite from aggressive power plays, leaving your team with more resources to punish aggressive enemy overextensions. Another use of Wall is for verticality. Verticality can be split into 2 parts. The first is being to do with rotations with your team, and the second is to position immobile heroes in places where they wouldn't normally be able to reach. With the former, you can wall off common chokes to make it significantly easier to rotate. Common examples are on Hanamura First Attack, where you wall to the room right side with a variety of rotational options. Another example will be on King's Row First Point, where you can path all the way across high grounds to flip the map, or an icon ward first, where you can wall up above the choke to rotate past the choke, or an icon ward second, where you can wall up the right side to clear high ground and castle, although be wary of boops, especially from an enemy Lucio. In some of these cases, you're flipping the map, meaning you're basically swapping normal positions on attack and defense, and when this normally happens, the enemy team won't know where to position and will give up their angles for free and play in a linear fashion, giving you the edge in map control. Now, with the latter point about repositioning immobile heroes, here's Spilo giving a creative example about utilizing Mei Wall.
What can you do with Mei Wall here?
Oh, you think you get me up on this side ground on the top right?
Oh yeah, you got
made.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys could have Mei Walled up here like 5-6 seconds ago and just had your on a crouch right here. Bingo. They walk through there, massive nade. You can heal your team, and it's so hard for them to see you. And even if they do see you, you just drop and you go play stairs or you play corner. Easy peasy.
Yep.
And the Mei Wall, again, their Mei Wall doesn't do squat.
I'll also play another example of a Contenders team pulling this off on Havana in the background. I strongly recommend you go into custom games and practice finding and pulling off these quirky Mei Walls. Note that you can also use the cart itself to wall off of, which is especially important on gaining high ground on maps like King's or Third Point Attack. Now moving on to how to utilize Mei Wall and the Mei Mirror. Here's a clip of me explaining to the team I coach, Team Dynamo, when to wall off the opposing Mei to rush and take a 6v5. You can wall this Mei, you guys can just rush and then take the 6v5, and your McCree doesn't even have to play this angle. And because it's going to take quite a long time, right, for her to like, trot all the way back to her team, you guys can take the 6v5, flash the Reinhardt, and then rush him, right? Now, one thing you could do if you're really, really extra smart and big brain is wait for Bubbles, because Bubbles is going to be the main counter to the Reinhardt getting flashed. But even then, you guys could just still win with the 65. And by the time the Mei walks all the way around, it's going to be too late. They're going to be at low HP, maybe you force an ultimate or two, and then you guys win this space over here, this entire space, and then you guys can start taking angles and whatnot.
Just saying that's smart.
Yeah. Big brain. Now, in some maps, that doesn't work, because this rotation here, for example, is quite long. On maps like Icon Ward, First Point, Defense, if the Mei's playing by right side mini, and if you wall off the Mei, she can just walk through the mini health pack room and wall off choke anyway. Whereas this like little trot thing takes like 5 seconds, which is too long. Maps like King's Row, if you wall off the Mei there, then she's obviously going to have a long way to walk back to her core. And then you guys can again rush and take the 65. There are also unique advantages and disadvantages to walling first and second respectively, as I explain here in a clip from the macro brawl section of my tracer guide. If you wall first, you are less likely to get a good split, but your team will be able to take space and spread out onto the points. If you Mei wall second, you'll most likely get a better split, but would have traded some map control. I personally prefer walling first, since you guys have a Lucio who can eliminate the advantage of walling second. Against Junkrat or Reaper, Junkrat should also have a harder time landing reliable spam damage if you do spread out onto point, and Reaper will also have to make up some distance to be in his effective range. Aside from that, make sure you cancel your Mei wall if it doesn't end up getting any value and ends up hindering the LOS of your teammates, and note that you can also wall Baptiste's Lamp or Orisa's Supercharger to prevent the invincibility and damage boost effects respectively, although this is something to keep in mind more so during the mid-fight. Mei's ultimate, the 7 Deadly Sins, makes Mei emit snow in a circular area with a 10 meter radius, dealing 20 DPS, lasting 4.25 seconds, and immediately granting 50% progress towards the freeze, increasing at 20% per second until 100% freeze progress has been reached, hence it takes around 2.5 seconds to freeze a target. Note that the freeze progress is greatly increased by using your primary fire, and that Blizzard will pierce through barriers, payloads, and ice walls. The most applicable piece of advice is to not always look for these massive 4 to 6 man blizzards, unlike with Reinhardt Shatter. Catching 1 or 2 enemies should be plenty to win the teamfight, especially if it's an enemy aggressively taking an off angle, such as a McCree or a Zarya paired with a Lucio taking another angle. You can also use your Mei ult defensively if the enemy team is rushing onto you, or if the enemy team are playing to live, as Starks elaborates on here.
So using your ultimate here does 2 things. For 1, it freezes the enemy team so you can kill them. And 2, it means that the enemy team can't follow up. It's not just offensive, you can also use your ultimate kind of defensively. Because the enemy team has the immortality field and you don't, which means that the enemy team just, like, they can continue dealing damage. But because you just got your ultimate, you could use it. It forces out the Reinhardt because, you know, he can't really do anything with his shield. And even if your Genji gets picked, like with Mei ultimate, if the enemy team doesn't have Transcendence, you can still win the fight 5v6 if the enemy team is in a position like this. Like, the enemy team is pushed up really, really, really far.
Aside from that, there's not too much to Mei ult. Now onto the final section of this video, positioning, playstyle, and composition. The biggest aspect of positioning with Mei, especially in war comps, is to know whether to stack on your Reinhardt or to split away from him. There are unique advantages with splitting, especially in the ball mirror, as Nata explains here.
And then your Mei can either play with the core right, or it can be like split. So right now we're seeing the split example. If the enemy team, first of all, doesn't even scout the Mei, what they'll do maybe is they'll assume the Mei's with the core, wall off the core, right, walk through, and then your Mei will counter wall them, and then since you walled second, right, your core will push through the wall and just kill them. When we're approaching this fight, we just need to understand that they're stacked and the Mei is stacked, right? We wall off their core and we push through. In this situation, it's still a bit scary because they could counter wall, so you just got to care of that. But, you know, you could wall through and then you could push. Okay, and that way you're out of the choke, right? You don't want to be in here. At least in here, you're at a bit more space and you can push through.
However, there are also some disadvantages, such as the increased risk of kiting from the choke that you are holding, hence having a D.Va split instead of a Mei would be more ideal, as Nata yet again explains here.
In general, you could also just have, you know, your team play over here, right? And have your Mei stacked here, and maybe have your Lucio sort of chilling over here looking for a boop into your team, and then maybe have, like, maybe your D.Va off angle, right? Because your D.Va's got jets, they push D.Va just flies away, right? They're going to have to deal with a Lucio, the core coming in here, they're going to have to deal with D.Va there, right? Essentially, they're going to have to get pressed by 3 different angles, and that's really, really, really annoying to deal with. Let's say you put your core over here and you put your Mei over here. If your core backs off, your Mei is stranded. And that's why also when you do these split plays, you're sort of committing more on these chokes. You're looking to go harder. But if your Mei and core is together and you want to kite, it's safer because now you don't have to worry about it. The split where you sort of saw the core plus D.Va, right? In this situation, if your core is pushed, your core backs up, your D.Va just flies away. It's safe, right? So if you want to play slower and you sort of want to like live more, right, and you know that you might need to back up because the enemy team might ult or something, then maybe putting your D.Va on the side is better.
Keep in mind that the advice I gave prior about walling the split of Mei can also apply to some certain maps. If you can't wall off the split Mei, then you should still try and rotate to flip the map by taking alternative pathing as mentioned prior, and then you can take angles to split focus from the enemy team. Now for a brawl poke hybrid Mei strategy on Blizzard World Attack, adapted from Soul Dynasty back in stage 4 of our last season against the Dragons. Essentially, this strategy revolves around 3 mini self-sufficient systems that if one goes down, the other 2 should still be functional. The first and most unorthodox of these systems is the Mei Sigma duo that will path co-side to wall up against the high ground adjacent to point, taking a unique and aggressive angle that will draw a lot of attention from the enemy team. This attention baiting nicely leads me on to the second system, which is the Ashe Mercy. Since the majority of the enemy team will be looking at the Mei Sigma, Ashe will have a free shooting range onto the enemy backline. The third and final system is the Reinhardt Baptiste. Simply put, you 2 are just here to apply frontal pressure and take space when the enemy frontline starts to back up. Baptiste also has good LOS on the other 3 systems with his exo boots. On second point, the same concept still applies, with Mei and Sigma splitting from the core and contesting high ground, with Ashe Mercy perhaps rotating into StarCraft early. On third point, again, Mei Sigma will split from the core in order to try and make this rotation unscouted, providing a powerful hard flank that can split focus easily. The biggest counter to the strategy is Tracer, who can quickly clear and contest an angle easily, particularly before even reaching the angle. In this case, you just split late and fast when taking your angle, and squishy heroes such as Baptiste, Mercy and Ashe should maintain LOS for as long as possible. Now for an offbeat, weird composition that if you're really wanting to play Mei, this may be useful to you. This composition is basically the Ball Tracer Echo hybrid, but instead of an Echo, you run Mei instead. Simply put, you want to wall off rotations that the enemy team makes. For example, this rotation into cave can be split off by a Mei Wall, giving your dive crew, i.e. the Ball Tracer, clear targets to focus. As normal, the dive crew should come from different angles, and your backline, i.e. the Sigma, Mei and Zen should have LOS onto the targets as well. Well, that's it for the guide. If you enjoyed, don't forget to subscribe, and if this video helped to raise your IQ, be sure to share it with your friends to also raise theirs. Until next time.